So now with the icons added, let's talk about fonts, because we also sometimes want to use custom fonts. And again, thankfully, Expo makes this pretty easy. For this, we can go to the app component because we want to set up our own fonts in the root component of the app so that they are loaded right when the app starts. Because custom fonts have to be loaded, and we want to do this early on when the app starts typically. Now, custom fonts can be loaded with help of an extra package. This extra package must be installed, and we can do this with Expo install. And the package name is expo-font. With that, this package gets installed into our project. I still have the npm start process running in a different tab, but I'm also installing this package. And once this is installed, in the app component, we can import something from Expo font. And that something is a hook, a React hook exposed by this package, the useFonts hook. This hook can be called and must be called in an app component, in this case in our root app component, to load these fonts. UseFonts is executed, and to UseFonts, you pass an object with instructions about which fonts should be loaded. Now, if you dive into the official Expo fonts documentation, you'll learn how you could easily include fonts from Google, because including Google Fonts is made extra simple with help of a special Expo Google Fonts package. That might be worth a closer look as well. Here I want to show you how to include any kind of fonts where you might just have your local font files, and therefore in the assets folder I'll add a fonts subfolder, and attached to this lecture you find two font files which you should download and add to this fonts folder. The OpenSense bold TTF file and the OpenSense regular TTF file. These two files are attached, and you should download them and add them to the fonts folder in the assets folder. Now, once you added them, they can be loaded with help of useFonts. For this, in this useFonts object, you must set up property names that will later be used for identifying the fonts you loaded, and values for these property names that point to these files that should be loaded. So for example, this font is called OpenSense, so I'll use open-sense as a property name, between quotes, since this name includes a dash and it would be an invalid JavaScript property otherwise. And then to load the font and assign it to this identifier, we use this require function, which we already know from images. And here, just as for images, we construct the path to this font that should be loaded. In this case, it's OpenSense regular TTF. And make sure you introduce no typo here, because otherwise loading that font will of course fail. Now we also have the bold version, and for this I'll load OpenSense bold here and point at OpenSense bold TTF like that. This will load these fonts. Now, what you should typically do is that whilst these fonts are loaded, you want to show a loading screen, or you want to show the splash screen of the app, which is the app loading screen, until the fonts have been initialized. And to do this, we can install another package with Expo install, and that would be the expo-app-loading package. This gives us a utility component which we can render, which will prolong the splash screen and will ensure that the splash screen is still shown until some condition is met. So now with this package installed, we can import app loading from Expo app loading. And we want to show this as long as we're loading fonts. Now to find out if we are still loading, useFonts thankfully returns an array where the first element, which we can extract with array destructuring as we did it for useState, where the first element is actually a boolean that indicates whether the fonts have been loaded yet or not. So we can now use this boolean to render our app loading component, which will then show the splash screen until the fonts have been loaded. So here I'll check if not fonts loaded, so if we are still loading. And in that case, I will return app loading like this. So in that case, I will show the splash screen, and once the fonts have been loaded, the component will be re-executed, and then we will not show the splash screen anymore. But now with that, we can use our custom fonts, because that is of course the main reason for loading them. And it's up to you where you want to use them, but I, in the end, want to use my fonts in different places of the app. For example, I want to use my fonts here in the title and instruction text and number container elements. And therefore in title.js, to use my custom font, we can, by the way, remove the colors import here since we don't need it anymore. But here, to use the custom font, all we have to do is go to our style object and add the font family property as we would do it in CSS. And now we can use these identifiers that we assigned in the app component. So in my case, Open Sans or Open Sans Bold. And here I want to use Open Sans Bold since I want to have some bold text. We can now remove the font weight here because this font which we load is already bold. Now in the instruction text, I want to use just Open Sans, so there I'll add font family Open Sans like this. And in the number container, I want to use the bold font again. So here for number text, again, we can comment out the font weight, but I'll add a font family of Open-Sans-Bold, or whatever you chose as your font identifiers. With that, if we reload the entire apps, the font is now a different one, as you can tell, because we're now using this custom font that is getting imported. The difference might not be huge, but it is a different font which we have here. So that's how you can add custom fonts to a React Native app.